Frank Winston here for the Pacifica Historical Society, host of the weekly show Footprints of Pacifica, where we discover and explore the lure and the lore of lovely Pacifica, its character and its characters. The show today focuses on the growth of Pacifica, or the non-growth as we look at it. In 1957, when our city was incorporated, we were a group of little communities surrounding the hills and some farmland. Our population was under 20,000. We were destined to become a larger suburban appendage of San Francisco, our hills filled with homes, and it was estimated that our population would reach 94,000. It was envisioned that our towns would be linked over the hills by major highways. Well, here we are, celebrating our 50th anniversary, and our population has only doubled in 50 years. When a person drives into Pacifica over the crest of Highway 1, it's like we're entering a different world. How come we aren't crowded with crisscross highways and with hills filled with homes? These green hills have been preserved for the future, but not without controversy. There have been many spirited battles fought over the years, and some people think that Pacifica has sacrificed a possible tax base, and others see it as making the town a magnificent place to live, like living in a park. It has been a long, slow process that has involved many volunteers, hundreds of people, and we will hear from some of these people in a video that we're about to show. And so, if you could roll in the video, and then I will come back with my in-studio guests. Please.
Little boxes on the hillside, little boxes made of ticky-tacky, little boxes on the hillside, little boxes all the same.
Like many others from somewhere else. I came here from St. Louis where, basically I watched farmland, rich river bottom land being covered with tracks, with housing. And so when I first came here in '71, to me it was astonishing that this much open space existed this close to a major urban area. And I learned that there were plans basically to build on that open space, population 60 to 90,000. That just floored me. That was too much. And so as it's turned out, a lot of my time and activities have been in trying to preserve these lands, or at least have development that's compatible with open space, which is what I believe in, and maintaining the main open space resources. Open space in Pacifica means a lot of things. It's hills like Cattle Hill, Sweeney Ridge. We're standing on Maury Ridge, which is part of GGNRA. We're at Shell Dance Nursery out back. It's also our beaches, it's our neighborhood parks, it's our golf course, a huge section of open space within town. In other words, and the backdrop of San Pedro and Montera Mountains to the south. It's real clear if a lot of people hadn't been active over the years, what would have happened. The example is Daly City, Dolger building down the coast, coming over, building Fairmont, in other words, coming our way. San Bruno, pre-incorporation, wanting to go Beta Breakers, consume Fairway Park, and basically take what they wanted, So, years ago, in the 1969 general plan, there was a '62 general plan long before I was here, And then 69, which was done by a consulting firm with the public. Duncan and Jones was their name, and they recommended Hillside. They called it Hillside Development District. It's been changed to Hillside Preservation District. And the idea was to, from word go, it's been undecided what we were going to do with these hills, how much development, and what type of development, and when, and how do we get up there. That was 380, the proposal for 380, to get us up in the hills. That took decades to kill. But anyway, in 69, Duncan and Jones recommended this district, and in the early 70s, we adopted in Pacifica the Hillside Preservation District on their recommendation. It's a model, not just for the Bay Area or California, but actually nationally. And it dictates the steeper the land, the less coverage, and it has goals and standards and criteria like clustering development, keeping roads off the hillside. In other words, not allowing it to become Daly City. Let me tell you, for instance, up at the top of Fassler Avenue, Cattle Hill, were to be 805 units, condos. Sweeney Ridge, originally about 2,400 residential units, okay? Cattle Hill, or Rockaway Highlands, was the development at the end of Fassler. That was the first referendum, the public taking it to a vote. In 1973, the public overwhelmingly rejected the proposal, basically saying the same thing that people are saying now, save our hills, all right? Ultimately, decades later, that led to Cattle Hill going in to the Golden Gate National Recreation Area. That rejection then, and allowing a very minor development in the back of Rockaway Beach, was the swap. For a lot of these were corporate-owned lands, and there came a point where they wanted to divest. They wanted to get out of it.
My name is Ferd Simons, and I'd like to know, when I came to Pacifica, there was no Pacifica, of course. There was the little towns of Pacific Manor and Rockaway and Valamar. And when I first lived here, why, there were not too many things going on. And what happened, to get the community together, we had a general plan study. I think there were about 100 people in the general plan study for the whole city. And when we were there, we discussed all kinds of things what we thought would be good for the future of Pacifica. The first thing we worked on was to clear off Lindemar Beach. At the time that we first came down here, they first started building. The big building was in Lindemar in the San Pedro Valley, and Lindemar Beach had a bunch of small shacks on it with fences around it, more or less excluding it from the use of the general public. And our whole objective was to get public ownership of the beach. We thought it was one of our biggest assets as a community, and so we finally did. There was legislation passed to acquire the property and clear the beach off of all the property except the one where Taco Bell stands. So we who were interested, there was a small group of people that we would go to see Brian O'Neill at the Golden Gate National Recreation Area and try to get legislation to authorize some of Pacifica being part of it. One large parcel that was suggested was Sweeney Ridge. We thought it was an excellent idea, and so over the years we publicized it, and we got a lot of petitions signed to have the area included in the GGNRA. It took a while, a couple of years, to finally get legislation whereby the GGNRA did include Sweeney Ridge. And we were off and running. In the meanwhile, we had designated certain other open areas that were attached to Sweeney Ridge to have the extension of the GGNRA. Over the years, I think mostly what we've done is sort of kept a watch eye on it and hope that it would expand and go down the peninsula. Our ultimate objective was to have all of the hills in San Mateo County protected and kind of identify our whole county as a green area. We thought it was a good idea. And over the ensuing years, why we've propagandized in order to help get legislation through to include these areas. We have a number of people that joined with us. It was simply a volunteer association, and the people that came in were people that were interested in open space all along anyway, and this was an opportunity for us to have our own area where we were living included in it. What we mostly were up against were certain people in town that were against reservation of any of the area for anything other than business and tax-inducing activities, which would mean our city would have more money to do some things that we wanted to do. We, in a way, had to buck the opposition all along, and we did that mainly by petitions and going around talking to people and get the support of as many people as we could. And it seemed as if the natural inclination of most of the people in Pacifica was to preserve the hills. And so it wasn't too tough of a job to get signatures on petitions. And it was through that vehicle that we managed to establish the whole idea of open space in Pacifica.
There's an open space committee that continues to this day, and they look at development proposals on open space parcels in Pacifica and comment on those and make comments to the Planning Commission, for instance. So that's one legacy of the open space history in Pacifica that continues to this day. When I look around, actually the best vantage point is from the top of the ridge by Maury Point. You can do a 360-degree turn and you see all the open space that is here in perpetuity, forever. And I consider that a major accomplishment of many, many, many people, and it is the history of open space in Pacifica. It's seeing all that land that will never be developed on. It will always be an open space. And so it will always be what Pacifica's character is that, and the ocean, the view of the ocean, that's part, ocean, I think of the ocean as part of the open space.
Our in-studio guest, Julie Lancel, currently a member of the City Council who's been very active in the open space programs, and Shirley Dry, an anthropologist and the site manager of Sanchez Adobe. And Shirley, let's start with you. What prompted you to get active and involved in the open space projects?
We moved here with my young family in 1958, within the year of incorporation, and I could stand on the edge of my home's backyard and look out towards Sweeney Ridge, down the valley, and not see another house. And over the years I watched development of Park Pacifica. And what you've seen on the these videos doesn't really show you the extent of development. And I grew concerned. I wanted to see some of our space remain in open space. And I began to support the various groups that were opposing development. I was also on the master plan committees.
Okay, let me switch to Julie so we
right.
get the background in
Okay.
a limited time. What
Okay.
prompted you?
Okay, well, when we moved here in 1986, we bought our home in Valamar. My husband and my daughter was a year and a half old at the time. And I remember one of the first things my neighbor said to me, he said, see that ridge over there? He said, that's part of the national park. And I didn't know it. He was pointing to Sweeney Ridge, which is on the north side of Valamar. And I was just thrilled to live in Pacifica. I had no idea it was so beautiful until we started driving around Pacifica looking for a home. And then I was reading the Pacifica Tribune, and it was very engaging. And there was an article in there about there were plans afoot to expand the freeway from where it ends at Fairway Park and expand it all the way to Rockaway Beach. And I was really upset about that. That concerned me, and I decided to go to a public meeting. And it was there that I first met John Curtis and also met John Culler, who at that time owned the Valamar Sports Bar, and began getting involved with some of the merchants.
And so one of the big projects was you both referred to as the videos Sweeney Ridge. Shirley, what was your involvement in the Sweeney Ridge open space issue?
By the time we had to concern ourselves with Sweeney Ridge, I had already been peripherally involved in several efforts. One was to prevent 380 from coming over the hill. And I'm often struck by the two berms on either side of Valamar as you go into the quarry lands. This was flat land, and Caltrans built those berms, and when we defeated 380, they went away and left them. Next thing we know, there's a proposal to develop Sweeney Ridge with, my recollection was 1,500 houses. And by then, I think seemed to be a number of people who had strong concerns about how far development would go, and we began to hold meetings. And it took us close to 10 years. Ryan was a factor in it.
You say Ryan, former Congressman?
Yeah, Leo Ryan, yeah. And his death, in a way, he had told us if Pacifica could make up their mind what we wanted, he would support it. And with his death, the two Burton brothers, who were representatives in San Francisco, came to help. And it just seemed to take on a momentum of its own. We did collect signatures. I've always credited Ferd Simons and Ken Miles with doing 80% of the work. Ken was a government employee and was occasionally in Washington, would always lobby for us while he was there. I believe Ferd did this also. Well,
you make it sound like once you activists decided that we shouldn't have as much building, it was just simple to do. But Julie, you want to share with us how tough it was?
Well, actually, in a way, it wasn't simple to do. It required a lot of effort and dedication, but there was always support. There was always support, and people who were going to offer their support, like Ferd, Clark Natwick, I know initially were really supportive with the highway issue, Bob Pilgrim, and then, of course, all the businesses that were going to be impacted by being sidelined off the highway onto a frontage road, and once again, you know, the freeway would do its damage, which, if I could just add an editorial comment here, or an opinion that I have, I think that the freeway impacted the commercial success of Pacifica businesses a great deal. I mean,
when you
because
say impacted, it made a downside that they...
Oh, absolutely, because all those businesses were all of a sudden not... I noticed this as a new resident to Pacifica. I knew where all the businesses were along Highway 1 south of me, but north of Valamar, I had no idea what there was, because everything had been... The freeway had gone down the middle, everything had been pushed to the side on frontage roads. You couldn't see them, you didn't know where they were. And I really think the freeway played a big role in that, and that's why one of the reasons I was opposed to its continuing.
I agree with Julie. My feeling was if we ran a freeway completely through Pacifica, that it just funneled traffic through Pacifica, there would be no stopping to patronize our merchants. And eventually some of them realized that also, and the impetus for extending the freeway tended to disappear, but it's recently come back up as an issue again.
Well, really, it's a different, the proposal, I just say the one he modified, which was the proposal at the time that had been vetted somewhat through the community, and I kind of arrived toward the tail end of that process, was it took the existing Highway 1, particularly from Valamar to Rockaway Beach, and that would have been the frontage road. The freeway would have started at Fairway Park, and as I said, gone all the way to Rockaway Beach. The current, and we were called the Pacifica Citizens Proposal for Highway 1, PCPR1 for Route 1, and our proposal was basically to just improve the roadway, make it safer, 2 lanes in each direction with an additional shoulder on each side, a landscaped median, and signalize, get the lights so they were timed, and which is essentially kind of the Clara Creek project. The Clara Creek Parkway was actually evolved off that plan, and it has gotten a little bit bigger than that, but it's far smaller than the one he modified that was considered in the late 80s.
Well, in addition to the highway effect, there was references in the video to 800 homes, 1,600. I mean,
yeah,
that doesn't happen at all now. It might someday, it might not. But what stopped all that?
Well, I mean, the one project, once I got involved, Clark Natwick suggested that I apply to be on the Open Space Committee, which is where I first met Shirley. I'm sorry, the Open Space Task Force,
Yeah, Open Space
which was appointed in 1984 and completed its work in 1988.
With the task force report.
That's correct.
Okay.
That's correct, which was really a series of recommendations about how to go about compensating property owners, finding ways to acquire open space, not being de facto, but finding ways to put it into open space without,
When you say acquiring, theoretically, it might have still remained open space, but somebody could have developed it.
Exactly.
So in order to prevent that, the community found ways to attract people to sell to some other holding that wasn't interested in developing much.
that's correct.
The
Shirley?
document was advisory. It did not have the force of law.
Right.
But we worked very hard to identify attractive features for open space. For example, neighborhood buffers was one, separations of neighborhoods, which we've really achieved here in Pacifica. And with Sweeney Ridge, my great pride, and believe me, there was close to 10 years of extremely constant work. We never gave up, even though we had obstacles placed in our path. But when I drive north on Skyline Boulevard, I often ask visitors to look to the east and they see a sea of houses. And then I suggest they look to the west where they see open space. And I tell them that that did not happen automatically, that it was years of very hard work on the part of a number of people. And for the most part, it was Ken Milesford, Simon, Peggy Edwards, Betty and Don Fricke, Jan Dutton.
Right.
And there were other people that contributed along the way. But it was not an easy job. By all means, you just have to hang in there or you're going to lose it. And I feel constantly that we have to keep this up. If we want to maintain our community the way it is with its wonderful open spaces, we can't let our guard down.
But that's one of the questions that keeps rising from time to time on votes in the city or even on the city council is if we have this lovely open space and we keep out development and business, how are we going to survive in this economic time where the state and the federal government don't really contribute to the degree they used to do?
I'd like to answer that.
Go ahead, Shirley.
I'm sure you both would.
Yeah,
But Shirley,
well,
Shirley
definitely.
first.
I've always said, you hear so much about property rights, and people often tout property rights. Well, I feel that they have the correct first letter with the wrong word. Excuse me. The word is responsibility. When you buy property, you buy responsibility to a neighborhood, a community, a county. You're hemmed in on all sides by regulations and ordinances. Isn't that right, Julie? Try to open a business up on a piece of property on top of Crespi Drive, and that's not going to happen. So I do feel that we have to take a different perspective, and it is one of property responsibility and instead of this flag that says we can do anything we want with our property.
And Julie, you face this every week at the City Council.
Absolutely. And I think that what I feel about Pacifica and the reason people like to live here is I think we've achieved a balance, you know, between open space and housing, and we're the right size. And once again, I think that this is probably a debate for another night, but talking about economic development and economic growth, because primarily what property owners want to build when they want to build something is they want to build housing, which is not business, which is not going to increase our sales tax revenue. And as I said, I mean, I think that, you know, if Palmetto Avenue, you know, people point to, they point to Half Moon Bay, and they say Main Street, Half Moon Bay. Why can't Palmetto Avenue, it looks like it, you know, why can't it be like that? And I say, because of the freeway, you know, because there's a freeway that goes through town, nobody knows it's there. Now, we can try and put some signs there, and we're working on a redevelopment plan for Palmetto, landscaping plan and all that, but the reality is that some decisions were made that really had an impact on our economic development that really don't have anything to do with open space protection, you know?
Sure.
I want to make one more point. One of the things I think Pacifica must do is to accept itself for what it is, a beachfront, poor community. And we should value what we do have, which is our open space, our beautiful lands and beaches, and not try to be Daly City.
Well, I think that, yeah, sorry. I think that, you know, one thing that I noticed growing up in the Bay Area is you look at communities like Woodside, Portola Valley, Atherton, and Hillsborough. They all obviously feel that open space is very desirable, and they pay very large sums of money for their houses in those communities. And I think Pacifica has had the good fortune, because people were active and cared about protecting some of those natural assets, that we really have created a community that's good. If it has value now, it's recognized now in the county. When I speak to other council people, they always envy us.
Well, that's a note on which we must have to wrap up, because it's a very high level of enthusiasm. Open space has worked to your satisfaction. For the footprints of Pacifica, I must wind down the show, but I thank Julie Lancel and Shirley Drive for participating with us. I hope you'll be coming back, because there's many more activities of the Open Space program. Remember, lives of great men all remind us we can make our lives sublime, and departing leave behind us footprints in the sands of time.